I'm excited to talk to you about today's Parsha and about the holiday that we had this week marking the delayed liberation of the American enslaved. In our Parsha today, there is a verse about our delayed celebration of our own liberation, delayed celebration of Passover for those who were unable to participate in the first celebration. And thinking about what does our Parsha have to offer a celebration and marking of the continued unfolding of liberation of our American. So the first thing, as I read this Parsha, reading this piece about the second Passover, was that it starts with people who are ritually unable to participate in the Passover celebration and who feel left out of the community, and go to Moses and Aaron and say, we want to be part of the community. We don't want to miss this opportunity. And Moses consults with the power beyond all powers, past, present, and future all together, and comes back and says, whether you're ritually unable to celebrate or you're on a distant journey, now or in the future, you are able to participate in the second. And this co-creation of divine law isn't just this all-powerful voice that speaks to Moses and Moses records, but that it's a collaboration between what's happening here in the community, but then I'm left out, but that's not right, and a rewriting of our sacred text make sure that everybody can be included and everybody has. Much like the daughters of Zelophehad, I love that parsha as well, where they say, wait, our father is not getting inheritance, our family is being left out, and the law is rewritten. That there is space in our sacred tradition for co-creation with the divine. We say one of the most common blessings, the motzi, to show gratitude for the bread we have. And the prayer is actually, we bless the source of all things, ruler of the universe, who brings forth bread. But the bread doesn't just grow on stalk. The bread is a co-creation, and whatever magic it is that lets sun and soil and rain turn into grain that we can then harvest and thresh and grind and flour to bake, that it's a co-creation. And so much like those other moments of co-creation, I think there's something to be learned from co-creating divine law to help us with our Juneteenth commemoration. The second thing that strikes me about this parsha is that the people are eager to participate, to be a part of the community. They don't say, oh, phew, we were ritually unable to participate. We don't have to participate in Passover. Oh, thank goodness we're on a distant journey and we don't have to kosher our house. So the people are eager to step forward and say, we want to be part of it. And I think that's an important lesson to carry forward. And the third thing that I think really struck me about this parsha is this concept of it's never too late. There's always a second chance, says Yosef Yitzhak of that the meaning of this parsha is even if you couldn't participate for some reason the first time, there's an opportunity to come forward even at a delay. Rashi says, and if you look in it, in the even in your book, where in verses 6 and 7, where it talks about this, there's a dot over the word distant when Moses comes back with the response saying, even if you're on a distant journey, you can come back and celebrate Passover. And that dot, says Rashi, means that the distance can even be just as far away as the threshold. That you don't have to be super distant. It could be you're just running a little bit behind where you want to be, and that you can eventually come forward and have that opportunity for that second chance to be part of the community, to be part of celebrating liberty. Juneteenth really is a mark of a moment in the process of liberation. And that I think that Jada Garrett in Bicola Shone says, Juneteenth is a reminder that the end of slavery is a process. It's not a moment, that we start with January 1st, 1863. It's midnight and people are waiting up for the Emancipation Proclamation to come forward. And the Union soldiers literally go to plantation as soon as they can, letting people know that their slavery has, that they are free people. And then it takes 2.5 years for that message to get to Texas. That it is not until June 19th, 1865, that Major General Gordon Granger gets to Galveston and lets people know that the Emancipation Proclamation happened 2.5 years prior. Some people say that the messengers who were to carry forth that message had been murdered, the liberation. Some people say it was an intentional not sharing of information to make sure that more harvest could happen. And in fact, in Galveston City, the mayor forced the newly freed people back to work to finish. So even in that moment where people have heard you are no longer enslaved, there wasn't actually a full experience of liberation. And new laws were passed in that time requiring travel permits, requiring proof of employment, that actually continued to create what was almost the exact same experience as slavery, even though the people had been free. But in addition to the 250,000 people who were waiting in Texas, there were another 100,000 enslaved people who had been in the border states who still weren't free until 6 months later, December 18th, 1855. It was a slow unfolding. Those 100,000 people had to wait until the 13th Amendment. And even with the passing of the 13th Amendment, there were people who were caught up in the exception on the 13th Amendment, which was if you are a prisoner, you can be forced slave labor, and that there were a whole new set of laws passed, that it was and they were enforced primarily against the previously enslaved, laws against vagrancy and loitering and not having proof of work on you. And the previously enslaved didn't have the right to serve on juries or to testify. And they were disproportionately put into what had sometimes formerly been plantations and were now slave labor camps, like parchment. You may feel a little disconnected from American. And I want to say that American Jews were here. USCJ, the conservative movement, has a Juneteenth Haggadah. And in that Haggadah, it notes that 5,000 of the 150,000 American Jews were here at that time. And that Jews made up 1.25% of the slave owners at that time, about proportional to their presence in the population. And that in 1861, Rabbi Rafal of the Manhattan Synagogue used his devar to defend slavery, and it was printed up and circulated as the American Jewish position. And that when Rabbi Einhorn contested this position publicly, there was a riot and the crowd tied to tar and feather. This is not disconnected from us. Sometimes it feels like, well, personally, my ancestors came here from Ukraine or from Russia or from somewhere after that all happened. And to that, Rabbi Sharon Bruce says, our immigrant ancestors thrived in an economic system built on stolen land and stolen labor, and that foundational wrong was never rectified. I think that sometimes we are aligned a little bit with the murmurers, as Rashi calls them, today's parsha. The people who, instead of being excited to contribute and grateful for the manna, instead complained that, in Egypt we had so much fish to eat, and now all we get is this manna. And in Midrash Rabbah, it says, you didn't even get straw to make your bricks. And you think you had all this free fish? And Rashi says, if they had known about the manna, they would have claimed to have eaten it at Pharaoh's table. Rabban Gamliel, son of Rabbi Judah, says, Moshe said these people were impossible to settle their angst. If you had given them beef, they would have said, we asked for mutton. And if you had given them mutton, they would have said they'd asked for beef, because it's all a pretext to be separated from the work of the God of liberation. I think that sometimes we feel dissatisfied and feel stretched too thin, and it can feel like a lot to feel responsible for writing. But I want you to think of how connected this is to our current world. Think of all the things that were barriers that delay and delay and delay, from the Emancipation Proclamation to Juneteenth, waiting for the 13th Amendment, to the laws that came after that continue to make it difficult for people to thrive. And then when small communities did thrive, like in Tulsa, where the Greenwood neighborhood was called the Black Wall Street, and the people were doing well, and the people were creating community and having economic success, there was a pretext of a person who's a suspect of a crime used to burn 35 city blocks, creating hundreds of homeless families, more than 300 people killed, and 2 of the girls from that time survived and witnessed this and asked for justice. Leslie Benningfield Randall, who's now 109, and Viola Ford Fletcher, who's now 110, sued for the lingering economic and social impact that had on them and their community. This case was recently denied. That this is not something that just happened in the past. As Jada Garrett says, Juneteenth is a reminder the end of slavery is a process of liberation. And Tema Smith adds the foreword, Juneteenth commemorates the potential of freedom. So those 3 things that really struck me about our are we ready to, again, co-create laws that unite our community and create opportunities for those who are left? Are we ready to offer from what we have, eager to celebrate liberation instead of saying, not obligated? And are we ready, even if we've been on the edge of that threshold, to cross the threshold and really celebrate holidays? Gotcha.